part of it for your audience could be, how do you build these cultures inside of businesses? Like how do you set it up so that people who don't think they're in sales can actually sell and grow? Because for a lot of my clients, it's the people who never thought they were in sales are now the rainmakers in the company.
Well, everyone's selling something at all times, right? Whether you're selling your idea inside the company or whether you are truly affecting revenue and actually selling.
Yeah, a lot of what I find is it's the subject matter experts in the business who are repulsed by the notion of selling, who when they understand the right process and system, all of a sudden are just crushing everything, and they're seen as the people who are solving, not selling. Those are the people who just kill it.
Well, that's why, Ian, thanks for coming. So I got Ian Altman here, and I want to first thank my Vistage chair, Kurt Green. So I'm in a Vistage group in Knoxville. They've taught me how to say that correctly.
Yeah.
I called it Knoxville, and they almost threw me out. So
Yeah.
I'm in Knoxville, and I asked Kurt Green, who you know, and he starts telling me, well, the reason I have a successful Vistage practice is because this guy, Ian Altman, taught me how to get it filled up. And I said, who? He says, Ian Altman. So I reached out to you, and thank you for coming in and being my guest on this podcast studio. So Ian, tell me a little bit about you, what you do for a living, and then I'll make sure that we introduce this book to everybody, Same Side Selling, which is phenomenal.
Perfect. So most of my business today is helping other businesses grow, specifically people who sell business products and services to other businesses, excuse me, what we're commonly referred to as the B2B world. And for years before that, I started my first company in the early 90s. We became a Fast 50 company. It's one of the 50 fastest growing companies in the Washington, D.C. area. We then built a software company also. And in early 2000s, sold those companies to a venture capital, or a group of investment bankers really, out of New York. They asked me to serve as managing director of the parent company. And we grew that business into 12 countries around the world and grew the value of the business from $100 million to $2 billion in about 3 years, which is candidly faster than you should try and grow a business. If you want to burn out, that's a way to do it. But after I kind of burned out doing that, I was trying to think about, well, what do I want to do? And people said, my buddies said, you always seem to enjoy helping our businesses grow more than your own. Why don't you just help other people do that? And I thought, there's a business in that? And so for the last 15 years, I've just been helping other businesses grow. And so it's people who get stuck, and how do we unstick that? People are stuck where their clients are always focused on price instead of value. How do we shift that? How do you get non-salespeople to actually engage in the process? And it's all integrity-based. Mm-hmm. So, which I believe is the only way to do this stuff effectively.
Well, it's the only way you can really believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So, this Willie Loman picture of, or this Glenn Ross picture, let's just be clear. This podcast is not about that. Yeah. Is that a fair statement?
Exactly. Yeah. It's the whole idea of always be closing. Yeah. Not us. In fact, half of what I teach people is, look, more than half the people you meet are not a good fit for what you have at that moment in time.
That's right. That's right in your book.
You want to find that out as quickly as possible, because if you do, you can spend your time wisely with the people you can help, rather than wasting time trying to convince people who you aren't likely to help.
Okay, awesome. So let me rewind just also a little bit, because before I got into the book, I read the foreword, and you were at this cadre event, so a little bit about, because that sets up how you wrote the book. Is that right? So tell us a little bit about where you met your co-author, and how, and what cadre, and what was that networking event?
So my co-author is a guy named Jack Quarles. Most people can probably guess with a last name like Quarles. Jack is a guy who spent 2 decades in purchasing and procurement. And so Jack and I were both in this CEO networking group called Cadre. And Cadre is a group that was founded by Derek and Melanie Coburn in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's basically an integrity-based peer-to-peer networking group out of DC, where everyone there is looking to learn and help other people. It's not like, a B&I type program where people are trying to get leads from each other. It's more, how do I get smarter? How do I get better in my business? And so it's all anywhere from solopreneurs to people running, good-sized businesses. And so Jack saw me speak at an event there and then said, hey, I want to attend one of your trainings. And I was like, oh, this is really cool that Jack's attending my training. I guess he wants to use this in his business. And the reality is Jack was saying, look, for my clients who I'm helping with procurement, I noticed when they're dealing with your clients, they seem to like throw price out the window and they're like, oh, no, we're better off paying more with these guys than with somebody else. I want to figure out what you're teaching them.
What did you feed them?
Yeah. And Jack all of a sudden, like halfway through the program, he's like, wait, this is all integrity based. And the stuff that he's asking about is the stuff that my clients should be asking about. And then we had this idea of, look, there are no books on sales written by somebody from the procurement side as well as the sales side. Let's do that. And now the book's in its second edition, and it's been a pretty popular book.
It's great because, the book says, which I believe in, a lot of times when you read a book, you're so happy that you're reading something that helps you put words around how you somewhat think. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm able to communicate faster after reading your book because I love how your book talks about sales, because it is sales, but it's really puzzling. So you're putting together this puzzle. So explain to me a little bit about how you use the puzzle analogy.
So most books on sales either use a game metaphor or a battle metaphor. So
winners and losers,
yeah,
right?
Game metaphor, you got a winner and a loser.
Yep.
In a battle metaphor, the loser dies. And then we wonder why there's this adversarial tension between buyers and sellers. We look at it more like in same-side selling, the buyer and the seller are collaboratively putting a puzzle together. So I bring my pieces, you bring your pieces. If they don't fit, they just don't fit. If they fit, then we have something to talk about. But it also makes it so now the seller doesn't feel like it's a beauty pageant and someone didn't pick them. We just mutually determine that we either do have a fit or we don't have a fit. And if we don't, that's okay. And I think that's the big mistake in most business-oriented sales is people basically teach their teams, look, every sale is yours to win or lose. And it's not true. The reality is that half the people you talk to are not a fit for what it is you do and how you can help them at that moment. It doesn't mean they won't need your help 2 years from now. But if you can disarm that in a genuine way, then they say, yeah, I didn't need their help right now, but man, if I needed their help in the future, these are definitely the people I would call. Mm-hmm. That's a great place to be.
It's a great place to be. Yeah, I'm back on the puzzle analogy. If you're trying to put a puzzle piece that's even close but not the right fit, doesn't just ruin the piece. It ruins all the pieces around it.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to cut bait.
Exactly.
Because think about what you're not working on if you're trying to shove a puzzle piece into the wrong area of the puzzle.
Exactly. And think about it. If you were with somebody who was clearly putting the wrong piece in the wrong place and kept trying to shove it in there, what's your opinion of that person? You're like, this guy's an idiot, right? And that's what happens with most bad sales is people just come across not looking very good for themselves or their companies, as opposed to, like, if someone reaches out to me to keynote an event, first thing I do is say, well, let me learn a little bit more about your audience and why did you feel I would be the right person to speak to your audience? What is it you're trying to accomplish? And sometimes they'll push back and like, well, why are you asking? So because if I'm not the right person for your audience, it's in our best interest to know that right away. And if I am, then maybe there's some questions I'll ask you and we'll shape this event differently to create a better outcome. And there's some times where I look and I say, you know what? I understand exactly what you're trying to do. This other person's probably the better person for you. Like, oh, you don't want to speak at our event? I'm like, well, no, I'd love to speak at your event in the future, but if these are your goals, you're going to be better served by this other person. And it's just having that notion of truly looking out for your customer's interest. If your client realizes that you are more interested in their outcome than making a sale, then you never feel like you're making a sale. Because then at the end, you just get to ask a simple question, which is, would you like our help? Because if they're convinced that you're looking out for their best interest, it's not about what's it going to take for me to get you into this car today, what's it going to take for me to get you into this contract today. It's, would you like our help? And it changes things dramatically. Mm-hmm.
Okay, when we're talking B2B sales, I want to double click on something I heard there. If the client can feel that you're more interested in their outcome, particularly than you and your product, okay, this is the recipe. and this is what's in the book. Said another way, I see a lot of people trained in sales, and it's just the speeds and feeds, features and benefits, elevator pitch. How do we unwind that?
Well, it's actually pretty straightforward and somewhat counterintuitive at the same time. People have been taught, you got to give an elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch includes the as you said, the features and benefits. Here's what we do, and here's why you would want to buy them, kind of thing. And I've done research with over 10,000 executives around the world on how people make and approve decisions. And the reality is that I run them through this little exercise, and you should put them in teams to do this. And I say, okay, someone on your team comes to you and says, we got to buy this thing. It's called a Gezeitenblad. It costs $20,000, takes the vendor 45 days to deliver it, requires no resources on your part, and they give you a 10-year guarantee. What are the 5 questions you have to have answered to be comfortable making an informed decision to approve or deny that request? So I give them like 4 minutes to go through that exercise. Then we say, okay, now you have 90 seconds to reduce it from 5 to 3. And here's the interesting thing. No matter where I've done this in the world, no matter the size of the business is, executives ask the same 3 questions every time. And those 3 questions are, the first question they ask is, what problem or problems does this solve for us? Second question they ask is, why do I need it? Namely, what happens if I don't solve this? And the third question they ask is, what's the likely outcome or result if we make this investment? Not what did the salesperson say, but what are other people seeing in terms of results? So if I know that those are the 3 questions, then if I lead with my features and benefits, that's not aligned. So instead, I lead with what we refer to as the elevator rants. So a buddy of mine, Bob London, coined this term, the elevator rant. He uses it differently, but I still to this day give him credit for the term. And the idea is, let's say you got on an elevator, it's just you, the doors are about to close. Right before they do, someone sticks their arm in, the doors spring open. 2 people representing your ideal client walk on the elevator with you, doors close behind them. The entire ride up to, let's say, the 20th floor, they're complaining to one another about something that when you hear it, you think, man, no one's better at solving that than we are. In fact, these people are lucky to be on the elevator with us. What does it sound like in their words that they're complaining about? Now, a good elevator rant has 3 components to it. It has emotion, it has issue, and it has impact. So, for example, in the digital marketing world, your ideal client doesn't get on the elevator and say, yeah, we don't have a website, we need one. That's not it. Your ideal client says, we've been spending money on marketing and website, and we're just not getting any conversions. We're not attracting the right people. We don't stand out from the competition. And if this keeps up, this new idea we have, this great thing we have is just going to fall on deaf ears, and we're not going to reach our potential. All right? So that's the emotion, the issue, and the impact. So we want to lead with the problems we solve. So then it's a matter of, when people come to us, they're usually trying to solve one of these 2 or 3 problems, either this issue, or that issue. So in my business, it would be, people come to us because A, they can't figure out how to engage their non-salespeople to grow their business because those people feel like sales is bad. They don't want to do anything, but if they could, they could be more successful. B, their people tend to focus on price instead of value, so every client is just all about beating them up on margin. And 3 is they pursue some deals forever. They don't stand out from the competition. They get commoditized, and the deals just die. People go silent, and they don't know why. So if you're facing one of those problems, that's when people often come to us to turn that around and grow from, whatever it is, from my clients in these examples, from 17 million to 100 million, from 100 million to 600 million, from 5 million to 50 million in short periods of time. And so it's that notion of focusing on the problems you solve rather than focusing on what it is that you do.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So somebody just listening to that, because most people who watch this podcast are B2B, and I've started this whole podcast. One of the reasons I started it is because we're starting to tell people they should have podcasts. And it really looks disingenuous if we don't have a podcast.
Yes.
So I thank you. So somebody hears that, particularly, it just resonates with me so much. You have a lot of people who have this notion of sales. I love the university I went to, but I often have been quoted saying, I'm going to ask them for my money back because they never told me how fun and and how complex and problem solving sales really is. They basically told me, they never said this sentence, but if you can't do accounting and you can't do finance or HR and you can't do engineering or you don't want to do these things, if you tried everything and none of it seems to work, you just probably end up in sales. But because there was no sale. Now I think there are sales curriculum out there.
Sure.
I have 2 kids in college, and both of their universities have sales programs,
That's great.
I find that to be fantastic. And they are teaching models that are similar to what you guys have done here. So if somebody wants to know more about this, can they go to seminars? They can watch your podcast. I want to make sure that you have a terrific podcast. Say a little bit, 2 or 3 ways that they can get more information from you. They can read the book, and maybe somebody wants to talk to you more about solving some of their problems.
Sure. So the Same Side Selling podcast, everything's branded under Same Side Selling. So if you go to Same Side Selling, we actually have a whole digital academy. So what we found is pre-COVID, I would have told you people can't learn this stuff online. Everything's got to be in person. About 6 months before the pandemic hit, I had a bunch of clients who said, is there a way to reinforce some of this stuff? Why don't you build a platform? So we built this thing called the Same Side Selling Academy. We have a better than 95% renewal rate. It's been going now in 4 years, and it's like just, I feel stupid that I didn't do it years earlier, because it creates this environment where people can role play, they can go through different scenarios. We do live coaching every month. That's probably the most fun thing I get to do all the time.
It worked. It's carried over.
Yeah, it's just, it's been phenomenal.
So you can say it. You were wrong.
I was totally wrong. Totally wrong. In fact, someone on my team for years was like, you should create this. I'm like, I don't think it's going to work. People don't want it. And now it's just, our students in there just kill it. And every month we have them come on and tell us a story about, okay, what worked or didn't work. And you get people where they will say to us, well, I had this deal. It's been lingering for 2 years, and then we role played it in the academy. We have something called the Coach's Corner each month, where we role play things live. They all get recorded and transcribed, and so we role played it last month, and then I reached out using that exact approach, and now we landed that deal. Okay, well, how big of a deal is it? It's a decent deal. It's like 10 years, $1 million a year. Like been lingering for 2 years, and in 30 days they turn into account. Or you get, or I'll have podcast guests on where it's, well, where are you guys at? Well, when we started working with you, we were like 3 million, and that was 3 years ago, and we had done like 2.8 the year before and 2.7 the year before, and this year we'll close out at 50 million. And it's just giving people an integrity-based approach they can actually follow. Now, if people don't do the work, they're not going to see the results, but that's life. So as long as they do the work, we've got kind of a model that I think is delivering some pretty great value these days. And the people who don't use it, we actually reach out and we'll say, you're not very active in the academy. Maybe you shouldn't continue.
Right back to your integrity sale.
Yeah, because if they're not using it, I don't want them paying for it. And once again, it's everything from solopreneurs to, we've got multi-billion-dollar multinationals where their entire global sales team is in the academy. So it's funny because you'll hear stories where 2 different members, one will say, oh yeah, I used this approach and it really, it's this huge deal. It's like $25,000. I'm like, oh, Cynthia, that's great. Fantastic. Congratulations. Next person comes on and goes, well, so we used this approach and that approach, and we thought we were going to lose this account. We ended up preserving it. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. How big of an account is it? I mean, it's a decent sized account. They spend like $30 million a month with us. And you see everyone's face on Zoom like, what? Right? But it's kind of cool because the problems they face are the same problems,
right? Just
at different scale and for different teams.
Fantastic. So Same Side Selling Academy, online resources.
Yep.
The book, Same Side Selling.
Yep.
Issue 2.
Yeah, this is second edition.
Kind of second edition. By the way, with a foreword by none other than Daniel Pink.
Yep.
So that is fantastic. And then just in general, you do keynotes still. You're still doing that.
Yeah, keynotes. I do workshops for companies. So businesses will bring me in to work with their team. We do these group immersion programs around the country when there's demand for them. So like right now, we've got people who said, hey, can you do one in Florida? And we got another group that says, can you do them in Chicago? So now we'll start telling people, okay, hey, if you want to come to an event like this in Chicago or Florida, let us know. And then once we get a half a dozen companies who want to do that, we roll it out to that area.
The world's getting back to some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as much as it was, but because we found out that remote does work for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But there's culture and team building and some boondog fun.
Yeah, there's there's a dynamic when you get people in a room together that you don't necessarily get via Zoom.
There is. So, Ian, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely terrific. We'll stay in touch.
Cool.
Appreciate it. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right, man. Thanks.